Hello, everyone, and welcome back. What a thrill it is to have today's guest with me. Jackie Brooks of Brookhaven Dressage is joining me today for a conversation I have been really looking forward to. Jackie has a career that has spanned more than 20 years as a dressage rider, trainer, and coach. During this time, she has the distinction of being a two-time Olympian for Canada in 2008 and 2012, a Pan Am team silver medalist, and has represented Canada in a number of high-profile international competitions. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. That's that. I love when people say all that stuff. It brings back like such great memories right away. I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that stuff. It's amazing. It's so fun.
Well, that's the one thing I think this is our first time meeting, so I'm very grateful to have you here. But one of over the years of following you, I've always noticed that you have a really great energy about you, and that so yes, that's great when you can share this with people and share your experiences and still get excited about what you've done.
Yeah, it is. But it is. I mean, life goes by so fast. And then you're always like you're in that race, just doing your life and doing your life and doing your life. And then, something like that, someone introduces you and you're like, yeah, that was on my list, all those things, and you actually are checking them off as you go along. So it's nice to hear it.
Yeah.
Nice to hear it.
Awesome. All right. So let's start off a little like right back at the beginning. You went from being a groom for Ashley Holzer at the Pan Ams in Cuba, which I think was 1991.
Correct.
To riding as a representative for your country at the Olympics twice. Was making the Olympics always a goal you had, or did being around the elite level competitors inspire you to dream bigger?
Yeah, actually, no, the Olympics was the ultimate goal since I was probably born. I did a lot of sports growing up, and always with the end goal was the Olympics. So I started as a competitive swimmer. I did some skiing, I did some sailing. And, when I was getting to progressively more expensive sports, my father finally said to me, well, how much are riding lessons? Like, we're getting, to the point you want your own sailboat. Maybe we'll get you some riding lessons. So my goals were always big for the Olympics. And, I tried in a number of sports. And I got lucky with the riding. I mean, I was exposed to it at such a high level at that Pan Am Games, and that was my first experience with dressage. So I was lucky that the first competition really that I went to was that high a level. So it's certainly that's what attracted me to that sport for sure. And also, I think cardiovascularly, I just came short in the other sports. I never got to that really elite level. And with the horses, you have this teammate that you have strengths and weaknesses, so that they make up for that weakness in me. And then I can use, some of my athletic ability to help them achieve, be the best they can be. So that partnership for me with the horse really was what allowed me to be an Olympian for sure.
Wow, that's great. And so did you have any riding experience before you
I
came
always
across
wanted,
Ashley?
Yeah, I always wanted to ride. I did some summer camps. I worked as a counselor. And then when I went to the University of Western Ontario here in Ontario, and in my third year or so, I bought a moped or something, and I went to a local barn, and I just went in the barn and said, I'll ride anything that you have. And there was an older gentleman there, and he said to me, oh yeah, come here, we've got a horse here no one's riding. So show me the horse, show me where the tack was. It was mostly a hunt barn with some hunters. And I said to him, okay, great, I'll be here tomorrow to ride. And so the next day I show up, and I get the horse out, and I get the tack out, and this lady comes out, and she's like, what are you doing? Who are you? Why are you riding my horse? And I'm like, well, this guy said I could ride this horse, and she's like, just a minute, I'll be right back. And she stomps out, and in comes the gentleman that I'd met. Turned out he was the vet. He was her husband. And she was reaming on him for saying I could ride the horse. And he was saying, he says to her, oh, Margaret, you never ride this horse. Look at this nice young girl wants to ride this horse. We should let her ride the horse. So then we went in the arena, and I had sort of a trial. I rode the horse around a little bit anyway. She ended up liking how I rode it, and I ended up riding for them for the next 2 years during university. But that was hunters, just exercising them a little bit, I really was not very good at the time. And then, and then I met Ashley through another friend who was her groom, and she ended up getting a full-time job, and she had already committed to going to Cuba. So she said, phoned me and said, listen, will you step in and take over and go to the games with Ashley? And I was like, of course I will, So Ashley calls me and she says, well, are you experienced? Do you know what you're doing? I'm like, yeah, of course. I know everything there is to know about grooming, thinking like, how hard can this be to learn? So fortunately, we had to be in quarantine for about 3 weeks with the horses, just for the rules. And I was quarantined with our chef at the time. Her name was Jill McCrae. And she, in those 3 weeks, basically just did the Coles Note crash course, taught me how to braid, taught me how to do everything. So by the time Ashley came to actually compete, I had a pretty comfortable feeling about what to do. And that games was amazing because we were in Cuba, we were all together with the jumpers. So we ended up helping, like I ended up helping with Ian Miller's groom, helping cool off Ian's horse after the jumping final, and also Forever Diamond for Danny. Like we all ended up helping each other. So I got to meet sort of everyone in that one experience. And so then as I went along, when I see people like that, they I think they forget I was grooming. They just think they know me from somewhere, or I'm not quite sure, but I have a good familiar feeling with a lot of those guys. So
Wow, that's awesome. Wow, you're a quick study. I
that
got
was
this.
quick. Well, 3 weeks. I had 3 weeks. That's long.
Oh my goodness, good for you. So how surreal a feeling was it then when you made the Olympic team 18 years later after going to the Pan Ams as a groom, as well as making the Canadian team alongside Ashley? Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, and Ash is very good that way. She brings a lot of people along, and they end up getting their own businesses and staying with her training. She's the only trainer I've had, and I still train with her to this day. So and we become very, very good friends as well along the way. And I think we got along very well in Cuba as friends as well. So we've had a great relationship on all the levels for the whole time. But certainly when we were in Hong Kong and London together, that was really, really special, of course. And we also, our group is very tight. Like the kids that went to the Olympics this year, Chris and Brittany and Naima and Lindsay. Well, Lindsay was my groom at my first Olympics. Her family lives next door to my farm. So I taught her riding from the time she was 12 or so. And then when she was 18 or so, Ashley's her godmother. So she left Newmarket and went to New York to work for Ashley. And she ended up grooming for Ashley in London. So, it's a very tight group all the way around. Chris is one of my best friends, Brittany's, and, we're all just so close. And it's all Ashley sort of is, the catalyst that has kept everyone together, even though everyone has gone on to have their own careers and their own businesses, their own Olympics now, all of those guys. But she still is the one, she'll warm us all up in Florida for all the classes, and we all still go to her for training. So it's it's rare in the sport. The sport's a funny one. People get frustrated, or I don't know what happens, but people seem to move around a lot. And in our group, we just don't have that. We all seem to have a good thing, like a lifelong support system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that is, really special. So being on teams with any of those guys, like now that we look forward to Paris, there's a good chance it could be, Ashley could be riding on the American team. I have some good horses coming up. I could be back on the scene. Lindsay could still be on it. Chris, Brittany, it could be a big mix of all of those generations of riders. Like there could be all of us, competing in that one, which would be really special.
So when you were on that team with Ashley, I mean, I'm sure your head was like in the game, but did you have a moment where you just kind of realized how far you'd come and where you were after 18 years of starting that journey and who you were with?
Yeah, I think Ash and I had spent so much time together by then, and it was very, very natural for us to be on teams together or at competitions together. And the funny thing about the riding, okay, certainly it was big going to the Olympics and wonderful and all the things that people describe it as. But the actual competition, when you go down the center line with your horse that you have been preparing for, I mean, I had my first Olympics, I'd had Sam since he was 5. I trained him to Grand Prix. I, been in countless shows with him already. So the actual act of competing at the Olympics was not that different than just competing. And the horses don't know it's such a big deal. So, honestly, once you sit on them and you start to trot off and they're the same as they are every single day, then your heart rate comes down, you're just like, oh, okay, now I'm just hoping I don't make any mistakes and I do a good job for my country. And I do the job that I was selected to do, not all of a sudden be a gold medalist or anything, just go and do what got me here. And Ash, because, when you're competing to get to the team, you're competing almost every weekend because it's, you're trying to chase the scores and trying to get yourself on that team. So we've been in that situation, particularly that year, already 15 times doing that Grand Prix. So it feels very familiar at the time.
Right. So I'm sure like a sense of comfort. You've got to feel
Totally.
comfortable. Yeah.
Totally. It would have been weirder to be on a team without her.
Okay.
Than with her at that point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have heard that when you are teaching, you use a lot of sports analogies other than equestrian ones. And where does this come from? Can you share with us your other sports experiences and how you've managed to incorporate those in your training methods?
Yeah, so it's a funny sport to learn, I found, because I did learn a lot of sports. And, typically in most sports, you're learning how to balance on the apparatus, whatever that is, the bicycle, the pair of skis, the boat, how that interacts with the world. And then you apply it to the sport you're doing. So, if I was ski racing, I had to learn to ski. And I had to perfect skiing. And then, then you started doing gates and then there was a difference between slalom and giant slalom and downhill. And you got into the specifics of each sport. The same when you're, doing sailing, you have to learn how to read the wind, how the sail reacts to the wind, how the boat reacts to the wind, way before you actually could go out and race on a course. If you just went out and started racing and no idea how to sail, you're not going to do very well, And what I found with dressage, it was sort of too melted together. It was all about, how did you do a shoulder in? How do you do a half pass? How do you do a pirouette? And the attention to just how do you ride a horse when you get beyond just balancing yourself on the horse. But what's the actual balance for that horse to have to be in to be able to do those movements? And that gap for me, that took a long time for me personally to figure out that those are two different things. So when I teach, I try to put it in perspective with something that person already knows how to do. So if they know how to ride a bike, then I can relate it to maybe experiences that they've had riding their bike. If they know how to downhill ski or, whatever it is, there's usually some kind of common ground I can find between they're teaching them how to ride a horse and something that they've already accomplished or mastered or understand. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just an easier way for people to understand what it is they're trying to do, in life in general. Like, I don't know if you've ever put even together an IKEA bed or an IKEA piece of furniture. If you've got two of them, the first one takes you 12 hours. The second one takes you 12 minutes. Like, right. Once you've done something once, we tend to be, our central nervous system and the way that our bodies work and the way that our minds work, we tend to be able to do that more quickly, a second time, a third time. You learn how to do a flip into the pool. You pretty much can do it for your whole life. If you learn how to ride a bike and you don't ride it for 20 years, you pretty much can get back on and ride it again. So if you have taught your body how to do something, and then I can say to you, okay, well, when we're doing that, when we want to balance the horse for a pirouette or we want to balance the horse for a half pass, it feels the same as, when you do this on your bike or when you do this on your skis or, something that you can relate to. It just lets your body know already the pathway for that. So yeah. It's a more effective way, I think, and I think it gets confusing. I think life gets confusing when you're so close to something and somebody can't tell you that you actually are that close. like you think it's something really different, but it's not. And then someone relates it to you. And I say this in clinics all the time. You go to a new city and you're in your hotel and you go to the museum the first day. And then the second day you go to the art gallery. And the third day you decide to go to a Broadway play, and you're on your way to the Broadway play and you pass the museum and then you pass the art gallery and you're like, oh my God, they're beside each other. I had no idea, and you didn't realize like that they were so close. So then the next day you can get home to the hotel because now you have an understanding of where everything is. And so if you do that with the horses, all of a sudden you recognize, oh, I had this feeling yesterday. So I know where I am now and I can get back to that, or I can get to it quicker uphill or the hind legs forward or whatever it is that you're struggling with. If I can give you a way to get there a little bit quicker, or a way that maybe you've gone before but you didn't realize it, then it's less frustrating for you, less frustrating for the horse, for everyone involved, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I've never really thought of it that way. Like pulling on those past body knowings, like you said, that it's all about habit. If you know how to do something really well, if you can link it to something and how the subconscious works, and how it pulls it out, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. And when you mentioned, sorry, go ahead.
There are certain laws of physics and there are laws of nature and biomechanics that you can't argue with them. And I feel like because they're just such beautiful creatures, they'll put up with stuff that, if you got on a bicycle and I was going to say, okay, you've got to turn your bike, and you applied the same kind of pressures that horses will tolerate, the bike won't turn under those pressures. But the horse still might, because somehow he's figured out that it makes you happy, and he has deciphered that holding his head, too far to one side and kicking with a spur on the other side, he somehow deciphered that means you want him to turn.
Yeah.
And I think we take too much advantage of that. Like I like to teach riding that if the horse, that I don't give any responsibility of the sport to the horse. All that horse has to do is want to participate in reacting to what I'm asking him to do, and that I don't interfere with his ability to do it. And then if I asked an inanimate object, a skateboard or a pair of skis or a bicycle, to do what I'm asking this horse to do, am I sitting and applying pressure in the same way that the bicycle would be able to react? Or am I applying some kind of pressure that makes no sense to me? And I think there's a lot of pressures in the sport that make no sense. When someone's just saying, just kick him, or, hold them, whatever people say, all the things people say.
Yeah.
So I don't like that kind of training of them. I prefer a much more sport-based training of the horses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a partnership. And I love the fact too, that you mentioned about the whole balance thing. And that's something, like, as a massage therapist for the horses, I consider, and I'm working with all the time. Right. And I guess you can go back to your individual sport, that when you're learning something new, sometimes it takes that connection from here to your body time to figure out the balance and how to make the feet work and legs work. And I'm talking about with the horse. So again, I guess you holding responsibility for what goes on under the saddle then sort of makes it a little bit easier for the horse as they're learning something new. I've witnessed so many times where, you expect the horse to figure it out once just because they've asked, right? But oh my goodness, yes, balance is so important.
Yeah, and the biomechanics of it too. I mean, you mentioned before we started that you're doing some CrossFit and you're lifting some weights and stuff. And lifting weights, it takes a lot of strength, but it takes a lot of technique. And if your technique is off, then you're very limited on how much weight you can lift.
Yep.
And if you improve your technique and you improve the biomechanics of how you're using your muscles and what you're asking them to do, there's a period where you progress so fast in how the increase in the weights, just from perfecting the technique of how to lift them. And so then you're thinking, well, if I perfect the technique for the horses, so if their hind legs are a little bit out, or they're a little bit tipped to one side, or leaning to one side, or leaning on one rein, and they can do it anyway, the amount of effort they're having to, to put into doing it anyway, and the alignment in their body and the way that their muscles are working or their ligaments are working are all being compromised. And if you can just understand the technique of that balance better, even just intellectually as the rider, at least recognize you're not in it, then that's 50% of it. And then you work towards finding, okay, so where do I have to have those hind legs to access their hamstrings, to access some thrust, to access some jump? How do I bring that from their hind legs and it comes swinging through to their shoulders? Well, you understand it when you pick up a weight and you pick it up with your legs and it lands on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, that's got to apply everywhere. It applies to high jumpers, it applies to long jumpers, it applies to swimmers, those kind of things. And when you look at like triathletes or swimmers, or the amount of time a triathlete's on their bike in a wind tunnel, figuring out the perfect posture so there's no wind resistance.
Yeah.
And if they lean 1 centimeter right, 1 centimeter left, they put their head slightly up, slightly down, the way that it affects the aerodynamics and then their power output and how fast they can go and how long they can go and their endurance from that tiny little thing. And then you're on a horse and you just hear somebody say, oh, it did stop hearing well, just kick it twice with your outside leg, or just hit it with the whip, or just, whatever. And if that's a really generous horse, it's going to react to that. But surely we can get beyond that now and say, okay, what is the absolute miss in the biomechanics? And why is that not working? Where is it not working, instead of just make it work anyway?
Yeah.
So that kind of dedicating yourself to that kind of thought, well, then it opens up a whole new way of looking at it.
Yeah, I love that. Along with some patience, understanding, and empathy.
Of course, because it's also an animal, right?
Yeah.
And it's an animal that probably, for me, I like to say to people, you have to communicate the way you communicate with a toddler. Like it's not like a dog where you can actually say, sit, stay, and I'll be back in 2 hours. You say, sit, stay to a horse and see you later. You probably never see it again. So it's, you have to be the language has to be basic. The commands have to be one at a time. You have to allow a moment for understanding before you have the next one. So, all of that too, that you have this, the conversation is at the right pace. For a horse too, and just learning that. So patience, yes, but I think it's patience in that it's how are you explaining this? Are you explaining this the way I could tell someone in kindergarten how to draw a picture or how to get to the store, how to do some math? Like it's possible, but you have to put it at their level.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So, given your history in the sport of dressage and in Canada, where do you think your voice is heard and embraced the most?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I like to do, well, of course, like on a global scale, I think it's for the helmets, because I was the first one in the Olympics to wear a helmet, and I'm a big, obviously I promote helmet awareness. And when the FEI brought in the rule that the helmets were going to stay, and then the riders put in a whole bunch of petitions saying they wanted to wear their top hat at big events and all this kind of stuff. Then we had to come up with a whole other thing saying, the bigger events, that's where the pictures for calendars are. That's where the most promotion of the sport is. And if you're going to be promoted, your picture is going to be on a calendar or on a poster because you were at the Olympics and now you're wearing a top hat, and now some 6-year-old, 7-year-old looks up to you and now they see you in that top hat. Now they grab Frosty the Snowman's top hat from their Christmas decorations, and out they go and jump on their horse, and now they put their safety in jeopardy. So having that the voice to hopefully be the voice for promoting that and keeping the next generation safe. I think that probably is probably what most people would say that they know me for.
Okay.
But I think most people that get to know me, I do a lot of clinics all around Canada, all around North America. And I think for that, it's just more what you're talking about. It's just it's a slightly different approach to making everyone enjoy their horses more and their horses enjoy the sport more. So I think that if you talk to people that actually know me, that's probably more what they know me for.
So kind of down to the basics, foundational connection,
Yeah.
reaching
Yeah.
out to people.
Yeah, exactly. Or just an enjoyment level. Like, if you were to go out skiing and were learning to ski and somebody put you on some steep run and you kept pointing the skis down the hill and you kept falling and you're having a terrible day. And then I showed up and said, you know what, we can find a hill that's challenging enough that you're going to have a great time. It's not this challenging, but it's not the magic carpet ride. And then I'm going to teach you a couple little things that keep you on your skis and you enjoy turning them a little bit more. And you're going to have a great day, and then all of a sudden you love skiing, you love your skis love you, so that kind of teaching at a clinic where, whether that means I put a neck strap on someone for the first time and they get the first feeling of not leaning on their horse's mouth, and then their horse gets the first feeling of self-carriage, and then all of a sudden everybody's having the greatest time they've ever had. It's just finding for each person where that line what that line is. And that's what I love about the sport. It's like golf or skiing for me. It has so many levels of enjoyment. You don't have to be piaffing for a 10 to be enjoying the sport. The first time they go on the bit is probably a better feeling than that 10 piaff. That's the moment you're hooked for life. So to give people that first feeling that's great too.
That's awesome. And I got to tell you, from your description of learning how to ski, I probably could have used you on my, for my first time on skis, because it was one of those really bad experiences. So
yeah, I know. And a good instructor can make it or break it for you.
Exactly. Gosh. All right. So during my time of preparing for this and doing my research, I came across an article, and I just have a question regarding that because it was an opinion article that you wrote in the Euro Dressage. It was fascinating. In the article, you used the term equestrianism in it. And the name of the article was Funding Begets Success. And you use this term, and was using equestrianism, was that your way of calling an already elite sport more elite, since funding for high level training seems to go to only those who are already near the top?
Yeah, so that was an interesting article. That came out of somebody else had written that success. Well, I guess what it is that in our current system, the funding comes from success. So success begets the funding instead of, funding allows for success. Mm-hmm. And so that had been written. And what I had written was actually an answer to that, where I had said, unfortunately, you need funding to become successful. And right now we don't get funding unless we're successful. So we're caught in this place where we can't get the funding because we're not successful. We can't become successful because we have no funding. Right. The equestrianism word itself was actually asterisk. So I think she had written a bit of the article and then she sent it to me and said, what are your feelings about this? And and then I added to the whole thing. Okay. So my real feeling about sport in Canada in general is that, if you take all the Olympic sports and you want to have success in all of those sports, you have to allow every athlete the same experience, regardless of how much that costs each individual athlete. So if you've got a fencer that in order to win a gold medal or to become successful needs to do 3 or 4 fencing competitions in wherever fencing is the most popular, which they say it's Europe or wherever it is. Since it's called épée, I'm going to say it's France. I don't know, but and you take a swim team and you take a soccer team, you take a hockey team, and you say, okay, they've got to go in 4 or 5 tournaments. And whatever that costs to send that team to those tournaments is what it costs. And then you've got a sailor who's got to go in 7 regattas, and whatever it costs to get their boat and themselves to those regattas. And then you have our dressage riders that need to go in 3 or 4 competitions in Europe, and the horses need to go. So the money just needs to be divided in a way that every athlete is afforded their experience, and that every athlete has the same kick at the can at getting that gold medal. Not every athlete has the same dollar amount, because what would send that fencer on one ticket to their competition with their épée in their back knapsack, and me taking my horse to Europe if we were both given $1,000, well, that $1,000 is going to go a lot further for the fencer than it is for me. So I don't think you should be punished because your sport costs more than someone else's sport if you're all competing at the same level. That being said, if Canada doesn't have in our sport elite enough athletes that it's worthwhile sending them on expensive trips, then we shouldn't be allowed, we shouldn't do that either. So where do you fit into what you need? If you're getting, between 68 and 72% in a Grand Prix, you can get plenty of experience going to Florida for the winter. You don't have to go to Europe and compete against somebody getting 80% to show you're still getting 68%. But I think as soon as we have a few athletes or a few horses with those athletes that are capable of scores over 73 or 74%, then in order for them to really get to that next level, they need to be sent to Europe. They need to be competing weekend after weekend with those guys in venues like those venues, so that when we get to Olympic Games and we're against Isabel and Charlotte and Carl and all those guys, you've already done it enough times that that's not your first experience doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's more that's more. And then how do we, right now you have to have somebody doing that to get the funding. So it's not even a question, can we even send them,
Right.
So we need to find, in a perfect world that Canada would fundraise like England did with the lotteries, and then that money would be dispersed among, based on your world ranking or whatever. And if you're a world ranked in the top 10 in the world in fencing and you're top 10 in the world in dressage, you get the same experiences.
Interesting. Yeah, I know in that article, one of the things that I found really fascinating and sounds like a great idea is taking those up and coming riders and sending them to Europe to watch and to observe and to get a
that is
feel
a
of what it
way
is.
less expensive way to do it. And for sure, those guys, whether they're competing at that level yet or not, would be irrelevant then. Giving them the experience of watching that or sitting by Carl's ring and watching him train all day for 3 days with their mouths shut, just like a fly on the wall, they would learn more from that. I would learn more from that than competing a horse I already know I've maxed out at 70%. And I'm just going there to get 70%. And then I'm coming last in that class,
Right.
So yeah, there would be a lot of different ways. It all comes down to money, of course. And, we need to find a way to raise the money. But we certainly, I think what holds Canadians back on a world stage in dressage is it's not a lack of talent. And it's not a lack of horses anymore. I mean, the horses are so well bred now. There's so many of them. And they're in this, honestly, the sport has not become more difficult. So when you look at the physical requirements of a dressage horse from the 50s to now, they're the same. To be able to do a pirouette, you got to be able to piaffe, you got to be able to passage, you got to be able to go sideways, all the same amount. And the horses are so much more sport bred, and the volume of horses, there's so many. So we can mount people with very good horses. And I think we have very talented riders. And we definitely have a lack of experience and a lack of exposure.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, that sort of connects it all in this article, you commented on the vast size of Canada. So, why would we spend money, sending our athletes all over our huge country when you could just send them to Europe or down to Florida to get that experience, right?
Well, this is it, and people like to say, oh no, we got to compete at home and we got to promote at home. Well, it's easy to say that because our sport is doable in we can do it inside, outside, weather doesn't matter, all those kind of things. But if you were downhill skiers, you go to the mountains. If you're a surfer, you go to the waves. So our sport is in Europe. That is where you would go to our sport. And Florida now in the winter is pretty high level. Like it's not Europe, but it's certainly very close. And a lot of Europeans are coming now. So you get a bit more of that, a taste of that. But I don't think we need to apologize for wanting to send Canadian athletes to Europe. Yeah. I think it's where the sport is.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a jumper client, a massage client for years. And I know that, he was kind of questioned at one point because during Olympic trials, he chose to take his horse out to Spruce and compete against the best that was going on out there instead of like staying home. And it's exactly, why not be around the best? Because like, even if you don't have the opportunity to ride and you're an up and comer, absorb all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Jamaican bobsled team didn't stay in Jamaica. Pretty sure.
That's right.
Pretty sure.
Oh my goodness. So in my research, I have found that as a coach, you have been described as practical with a positive style of teaching. How do you see that as the best way to get the most out of your students?
Yeah, so I think, like everything in life, the more you understand something, the easier it is for you to explain it to somebody else. And the more successful they are and you are, the more positive the experience is. So, when people really, really understand something, they understand it because it's simple for you to understand when they explain it. When things get complicated in the explanation and then they can't, then you get frustrated, the horses get frustrated, the instructor gets frustrated. There's a lot of do it again, do it again, do it another time, not do it differently or whatever. That gets very frustrating for everyone. So yeah, I really try to find a way with every single person to figure out how they learn it and then
Okay.
relate it that way so that their experience, they spend a lot of money on a lesson. If I travel to a clinic, that's an expensive lesson for them. And often it's a present or it's a once a year thing they treat themselves to. So for that 45 minutes, I want to make sure that they have a great time. And two, their horse has a great time. They don't come out thinking the horse was overwhelmed or frustrated or unfairly asked to do anything. And that they have really good takeaways that they, when I'm not there the next day, they have something they can work on and they feel comfortable that they can work on it. Not like, are they doing it right or not right? Or,
Yeah.
so I try to find really stuff they can take home.
Well, and being able to explain it in a practical and in a way that they understand, then you ensure that the next day, weeks, months until they see you again, they've taken what you've told them and they've, really absorbed it and had a chance to solidify it.
Totally. And they're not confused, they're not
Yeah.
like broken telephone that they heard. I said it a bit like not clear, like a little bit not clear, and they heard it a little jumbled. And then the next day they remember it even more, a little bit jumbled. And all of a sudden you're hearing back that you told them to, stand on their head and do something. And you're like, I never said that, So I think that clarity, you have to be very clear, and then people like to say to me, oh, I didn't hear that. I go, don't worry. I repeat this all day long.
Yeah.
I'll repeat it and I'm going to repeat it 100 times for you too. So that it's just a simple idea that we're repeating over and over again.
Wow. Okay.
When I was swimming, I stared at the black line in the pool and I went up and down. It was boring. And there was nothing exciting about it. You just put your head in, did the work and you got results. So,
Nice.
simple sport is simple,
Okay.
you just have to keep repeating it.
So on that note, and being a former dressage rider and having clients that ride dressage, okay, here's the F word that so many riders, the word feel. So how do you practically, in a way that, the feel that you want, how do you teach that to your students?
So for me, the direct translation to the word feel is balance. So
Okay.
do you feel balanced? Do you feel straight? Do you feel like your horse is leaning right, leaning left, leaning forward, leaning back? Honestly, you're sitting in your chair right now. Are you leaning forward?
I'm kind of sitting a little to the right, I think.
Right. So there you go. Right. So that's on. So that's feel.
Yeah.
Can you feel balance? If you can feel balance, then you can feel. And if you can feel balance and you feel, okay, the horse is unbalanced in a forward direction, is that why he's heavy in the rein? Do you feel him leaning forward into the rein? Do you feel him leaning back away from the rein? Is that why his head's in the air and he's hollow? Do you feel why do you have a spur rub on the right? Do you feel him leaning right all the time and he's leaning on your spur? You're not a terrible person kicking him. That horse has been leaning that way for however long because you've been sitting more on your right seat bone and you've been leaning that way. So feel that's for me, and this is where the sport is difficult. So the language is not clear.
Mhm.
There's a lot of words. Half halt. What is that? That means 100 different things to 100 different people. That flexion. You mean flex the pole? Does that mean make him round, or does that mean make him turn his head? Does that mean flex him? What does that mean? Like things need to be described very clearly uh, for people to really learn. So if describing a swim stroke, the catch is the catch. That's where your hand goes in the water and you catch the water. The pull is the pull. That's where you pull the water and pull your body forward. It's not open to any interpretation. That is what it is. So when I teach too, I try not to use words that have any ambiguity, like are ambiguous at all. Like if I want you to bend him rounder, I'll tell you exactly where. Do I want him, higher in the actual pole? Do I want him flexed actually between his skull and his neck? Do
Mhm.
I want you to pull on his chin? Do I want you to turn his eyes so he's looking in a different direction? Or bend? Do I want you to bend his body? Like instead of just bend him, bend him, bend him, bend him.
Mhm.
What does that mean exactly? So, it is just breaking it down that there's less room for interpreting what you're
Wow.
trying to say and actually just say what you mean.
Wow. I tell you, just you answering that question, it just almost makes me want to start riding again.
Yeah. Fun sport.
Wow.
Fun sport.
Yes, it definitely is. And I just love it. Okay. So does being in business with your parents give you a greater sense of stability, knowing that side of your professional life is entrusted to people you couldn't trust more? And how does it make you feel that in a sport where you need so much support, you have that for you already?
Yeah. So actually my father, we lost my father about 4 years ago,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but for sure that without my mother and father, then I would not have, none of this would have happened. So, in the beginning, I graduated from Western. I was supposed to take a couple years off to ride around in circles and then go on with my life and get a real job and all those kind of things. And my first horse was a grad gift that my parents gave me for graduating from Western. And that was Finnegan, and they subsequently have bought all my horses for me. And so when we made the first Olympic team, they were living in Toronto downtown, and we had a ski farm up in Collingwood. And I convinced them that if they sold Collingwood and they bought in Newmarket, they could still come up on weekends and enjoy farm life, and they could keep their city house, but they would only be 30-minute drive instead of this 2.5 hour drive up to Meaford and, all those things. And then I would have a place that instead of renting stalls, I could start, putting the money into a bar, into land, and an investment into my future and all that kind of stuff. So there were certain requirements for that. It had to be a Century home because they had the Century home in Meaford. And anyway, we found a place that fit perfectly. Sorry about that. That fit perfectly, and it wasn't for sale. So I put a note in the mailbox and said, if you ever want to sell this place, it's like perfect for what I need. And anyway, didn't they call me back and say, yeah, you know what, we want to retire for sure. Well, so they just sold it to us. And so I renovated the barn and, extended the arena and stuff. And my parents came that first summer. They came a couple of weekends, and then they came for the summer. And then at the end of the summer, they put the city house for sale, and they
Okay.
moved in and they never left. And we've had that now 10 years. So yeah, and my mom really helps with all the accounting and the billing and the running of the business. Oh my goodness. How do I turn that off on this?
Okay.
That is terrible. So yes, that part, everyone needs somebody really in their corner for this sport. You can't do it. You either need someone, that has an interest, and financially, maybe they can't actually do the sport, so they want to live the sport through you. But no one can do this without a support system. It's just too big. It's too expensive, and it's just too big. So for them to be able to afford to buy the actual horses, and then I support them with the business, and they support my business because we share the property, and my mom helps me with like every aspect of the business. Yeah, it certainly has made my life really great. you know, and really great for them. They came to both Olympics. They were in Florida. We have a little house in Florida. They came for the whole season, got to know everyone. They had a social life with that. My mom still has that social life with everybody.
Nice.
So for us as a family, it really, it was an all-inclusive thing that everybody really enjoyed. And my mom really enjoys it still. And for me to know that, that you just have that security. I don't have to worry about where my horses live, or are they going to, you know, am I going to be able to feed them the next day or anything like that? It just takes a huge worry off, definitely. Yeah. And you see people all the time. People ride for, you know, an owner or something, and they have a breakdown, and then all of a sudden the horses are taken from them, and they have no security of that, no security of where they live, all those kind of things. So yeah, certainly to have that in this sport is pretty rare, and I'm really very lucky.
Well, and as much of a gift as it is, I mean, you can't ignore the fact that you're in business with your parents. So I'm sure there were still moments where you guys had to learn to navigate the waters and communicate in ways that, you know, led to good business and good relationship.
Well, fortunately, my brother has a computer business. My mom helped him for 10 years before me. So I think that all got ironed out there. I honestly I've never had a problem, nothing with them at all in that way. You know, we've seen eye to eye on basically everything. Aww. So that's been, pretty lucky.
That's amazing. Good for you.
Yeah, there's been, really nothing.
Good. So you just sorry, what?
My brother did it. He ironed it all out.
Your brother got all the bugs out.
Yeah.
You just had your dressage symposium called Down Home Dressage Symposium last month. How do you feel it went, and what was the takeaway you hope people got from it?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So of course we've always had this time of year, you know, Charlotte came, Ingrid came, Carl came. There's always been a big symposium at what is now Angelstone, which was Palgrave, Caledon. And of course with COVID, there was nothing last year and nothing this year. And I have done a lot of clinics. You know, I've usually have clinicking 3 out of 4 weekends. So I know how all those clinics work, and it's difficult. You know, those ones with Carl and Charlotte, they're teaching people they've never taught before. Those people have never had a lesson from them before. You're in a new environment with the horse. The horses are very tense and uncomfortable. Then you have all the table of all these people watching you, and now you're also very self-conscious about, are you learning it fast enough, or, you know, and what are the people getting out of it? Like Carl's teaching me, I'm riding. What's the auditor getting out of that? Watching my lesson. Is he teaching them? Is he teaching me? Like, you know, it's a tricky one for sure. So when we thought this one up, I was like, I just want to do one that's really for the auditors. So we put 6 horses in it. I rode 3 with a mic, and I taught 3 lessons on horses that live in my barn that are in full training. And all the horses, apart from the 5-year-old I rode, are pretty much working towards Grand Prix. So they were all very, very well schooled horses. And then we could show, you know, examples of the training system, how we train them at Brookhaven, what we believe in, how we collect them, how we teach them to pirouette, how we teach them to piaffe, and how that starts at 5 years old, and how that starts with just a trot around the arena, and how we get them from just trotting around the arena to passaging and piaffing, and showing all the steps that are involved. And we had like 125 people sitting around. I made a little dressage ring within my arena, and everyone was sitting around. Everyone brought their own lunch because of COVID. We had them socially distanced in their groups. We had, EFO trailer there with all their, people could shop. We had a bunch of vendors at a snack table. So it was just so much fun. It was really relaxed, and it was really, the horses were perfect. And we prepared the horses well for it. Like we had the ring set up for the week before. We had the sound system. I had the mic on for a week. So no, the horses weren't nervous. They knew what was going on. They had, we desensitized them to everything. So everyone ended up really having a very relaxed, lovely day. The weather was nice, and it was like one of the first things people have done in COVID, like out seeing everybody. So a lot of people were just happy to just be out for the day and see beautiful horses going around. And I think that they learned something was a bonus for them. They were like, oh, and we didn't think we'd be able to relate, but now we did, and we have things we could do with our horses now. So it was really great, and it was a lot of people I didn't know, that I hadn't met at shows and I hadn't met at clinics. So it was nice for me to meet a whole bunch of like people that have a common interest in the sport as well.
Yeah. Did they come from far, or like?
Pretty much within like a 2-hour drive. A
Okay.
few from London,
Yeah.
and a few from Barrie, but mostly within like like Mississauga or Hamilton but yeah, people drove like, yeah,
Nice.
they came. I was shocked.
Well, that's awesome. And good for you for, no pun intended, taking the reins and providing an education and some entertainment, some, bringing together people for, to appreciate the thing, share the love of the sport.
Yeah. That's what it was. It felt like a celebration of the sport, and for a lot of people, they're in their barns, and maybe the most advanced horse in the barn is doing first level, and the horses are all great and they're doing a great job, but they just don't get to see horses ridden at that level, and to see 6 of them in a row, and in a training environment where they see them for 40 minutes instead of 5 minutes in the ring, or
Yeah.
a warm up is different, like where you actually see the schooling of them. I think people really enjoyed that.
That's good. That's awesome. So they all went home inspired.
I hope so. Yeah.
So Jackie, what is next for Jackie Brooks? What are you working on? What's the plan?
Yeah, well, after Goose retired, of course, there's a bit of a lull. You always have to be planning with these horses and bringing them along and stuff. So we decided to go for one more kick at the can, so to speak. And we have 4 really good horses now, well spaced out. So I have a 10-year-old who's just getting really comfortable with the Grand Prix. He'll show the Grand Prix in Florida. I have an 8-year-old that will do the advanced classes, the St. George and the Inter 1, and he's going to be ready Grand Prix at 9 for sure.
Nice.
And then I have a 5-year-old, and she, of course, is the most perfect horse in the barn because it's a mare, and she, it's just a question of time for her. She's swallowed a dressage book. She's like, I know it all. I'll just do it when I feel like doing it, and you don't even need to worry about me. And then I have a 3-year-old who will be probably the last one I train from that young. So we've got these 4, and I'm hopeful the 8-year-old, I think by Paris, when he'll be 11 for Paris, I think is a pretty I think he's my guy for that. And then the 5-year-old for whatever comes after that. So yeah, I'm in it for a bit still.
Awesome. That's where we want you.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully I have 2 at the level. I think you need 2 at the level whenever you're trying, so that you have, because things happen, and it's good to have 2.
Yes, it's always good to be prepared in this sport because you never know what's going to happen.
That's true.
Awesome. Jackie, thank you so much for this. This has,
problem.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time. I know how busy you are. And like I said, this is our first time meeting and talking, and I'm very grateful for you to be here. So
great.
Yes, thank you. So how can people get a hold of you? I know you have a website. Do you have
a very outdated website? Okay. Like everyone, I think, because Facebook is sort of taken over, and you can put everything up so fast. And anyway, so you can either message me on Facebook, or we do have a website, and there is a contact us, and that puts you in touch with my mom, and she takes care of all the clinic booking, all the ship-in lessons, all those kind of things. So
perfect.
Yeah,
all right.
Contact Mary.
Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great night.